Welcome back to Outlaw Operations. Tonight, we're diving into a chilling case filled with deception, greed, and betrayal. A story that seemed to be about love and ambition but ended in tragedy. Before we get into it, take a second to drop a comment. Where are you listening from? And if you enjoy true crime storytelling, hit that like button and subscribe. Now, let's settle in and get started. Story 1. Shanti Cooper was a loving mother, devoted to her young son, Jackson. She shared custody with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper, after their separation in 2013, a turning point that marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Like many after a divorce, Shanti decided to step back into the world of dating. But times had changed. Gone were the days of chance encounters and blind dates set up by friends. Now, love, or something that resembled it, was just a swipe away. Determined to find companionship, Shanti created a Match.com account. She sifted through profiles, exchanged messages, and met a few people. But no one stood out quite like David Tronas. David, much like Shanti, had recently ended a long marriage. He was looking for a fresh start, something exciting, something new. Their connection ignited quickly. Hours-long phone calls turned into text messages that stretched through the night. Emails full of sweet nothings and whispered promises filled the void of loneliness. And then, David made a bold move. He packed up his life and relocated to Orlando, Florida, to be closer to Shanti. Their digital romance had become something real, something tangible. Soon enough, they were inseparable. Despite her new relationship, Shanti never lost sight of her son's well-being. She juggled her responsibilities carefully, ensuring that her love life never interfered with her duties as a mother. When she and David decided to take the next step, it seemed like a fairy tale, at least on the surface. In 2015, the couple moved into Delaney Park, a quiet, affluent neighborhood near downtown Orlando. Known for its manicured lawns, top-tier schools, and family-friendly atmosphere, Delaney Park seemed like the perfect place for their fresh start. David purchased a sprawling 4,000-square-foot home for $600,000 in cash, placing it in a trust under his and his mother's name. A pool, a garage, and a separate apartment above it, it was a dream home. Or at least, it was supposed to be. But the dream quickly unraveled. The upstairs bedrooms felt small and impractical. The house didn't quite match their vision. And so, a plan was hatched. A full-scale renovation. A transformation. Shanti, passionate about design, agreed to fund the project, while David took the reins, overseeing every nail, every beam, every blueprint. Demolition began. Walls came down. The house was stripped to its bones. With the bedrooms under construction, Shanti moved into the garage apartment, carving out a temporary sanctuary for herself. Meanwhile, David set up camp in the garage, his dogs his only companions. What started as a simple home makeover became an all-consuming obsession for David. Every waking moment was spent agonizing over details, controlling every aspect of the rebuild. His world shrank down to this one singular mission. But by 2018, 3 years after the project had started, nothing had changed. The house remained gutted, a shell of its former self. Shanti had poured money into a bottomless pit, and frustration grew. Desperate for help, David turned to the reality TV show Zombie House Flippers, a series known for resurrecting neglected homes. The producers took an interest in the property, hopeful that this could be their next big transformation. By mid-April, plans were in motion for filming. But something felt off. The producer sensed hesitation, an imbalance. David was eager, enthusiastic. But Shanti? She was distant, disengaged. It was as if her enthusiasm for the project, and maybe even for David, had faded into the background. And then, something happened. Something dark. Something irreversible. Shanti's close friends began noticing changes in her behavior. She had always been warm, chatty, and full of life, but now she seemed withdrawn, almost haunted. Conversations became short, texts unanswered. When her best friend, Lisa, pressed for answers, Shanti would brush it off. Just busy with the renovations, she'd say. But Lisa wasn't convinced. Something didn't sit right. On April 24, 2018, everything came crashing down. A frantic 911 call shattered the quiet of Delaney Park. The voice on the line was distressed, panicked. It was David. "My wife, she's not breathing. Please, I need help." Paramedics rushed to the house, or what was left of it. They found Shanti unresponsive in the bathroom, her body covered in bruises, blood pooling beneath her. The scene was chaotic, but something didn't add up. David claimed she had fallen, but the injuries told a different story. The detectives knew this wasn't an accident. As authorities dug deeper, dark secrets unraveled. Witnesses came forward, friends spoke up. David's charm, his control, his calculated obsession, it all painted a grim picture. The money had dried up, the renovation a disaster, their love story a house of cards ready to collapse. But was it premeditated? Or had the pressure, the financial ruin, and the emotional weight pushed him over the edge? The trial that followed gripped the community. Prosecutors laid out damning evidence, revealing inconsistencies in David's account. The timeline was shaky. The injuries were too severe. And then, there was the trust fund, the money, the house, the financial motivations lurking behind every decision. In the end, the jury had to decide, was it a tragic accident, or was it murder? You tell me. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened that night? And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay curious. This is Outlaw Operations, signing off. Story 2. For Shanti Cooper, life was supposed to be looking up. She had built a life with David Tronas, invested heavily in their home's renovations, and dreamed of a bright future. But beneath the surface, tensions were rising. The house, once a symbol of their future, became a battleground. David had promised to add Shanti to the trust that owned the house, but he never followed through. She had poured her money into the renovations, yet legally, she had no claim to the home. Their relationship, once filled with romance and excitement, had turned into something colder, something transactional. By late April 2018, there were signs that Shanti might have had enough. But she never got the chance to walk away. At 3:51 p.m. on April 24, 2018, a frantic 911 call shattered the quiet afternoon. David Tronas was hysterical, barely able to get the words out. He told the dispatcher that he had found his wife unconscious in the bathtub, that she wasn't breathing. His cries filled the call, his panic unmistakable. When police arrived at their Delaney Park home, they found Shanti lifeless in the tub. The house, once a construction zone, was now a crime scene. David was immediately taken to the police station for questioning. According to David, the morning of April 24th was like any other. He claimed Shanti woke up between 7 o'clock and 7:30 a.m. By 9:30 a.m., he had left for a 1-hour walk, returning home shortly after. He said he then spent time measuring different parts of the house for renovations before leaving again around noon to take their dogs to Park of the Americas, a local off-leash dog park. David said he assumed Shanti was in the garage apartment when he left, likely resting. When he returned from the dog park, he focused on yard work, spending roughly 30 minutes outside before heading indoors. That's when he noticed something odd. David claimed he heard water running. As he approached the bathroom, he saw that the door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open, and there, in the bathtub, was Shanti. She was unconscious, submerged halfway in the water. Panic took over. He dialed 911. He begged for help. It sounded believable. A tragic accident. A horrible, unexpected loss. But something didn't add up. The detective questioning David noticed cracks in his account almost immediately. When officers arrived at the scene, they found something strange: the bathroom was dry. If David had truly pulled his wife from a full bathtub in a desperate attempt to save her, water should have been everywhere. But the floors were dry, the towels untouched. Then, there was Shanti's body. She hadn't just drowned. She was covered in bruises. Blood stained her skin. These weren't the injuries of someone who had simply slipped and hit their head. Something violent had happened. The autopsy confirmed it: Shanti hadn't drowned. She had been beaten. Strangled. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma and asphyxiation. This was no accident. This was murder. Detectives began picking apart David's version of events. They questioned him about blood found on Shanti's bed. His explanation? He claimed it was from her menstrual cycle. But the amount of blood didn't make sense. Investigators knew they were dealing with a crime of passion, a crime of rage. Now, they had to figure out what triggered it. One possible motive? The house. The detective asked David if the mounting stress of the never-ending renovations had anything to do with what happened to Shanti. He denied it. Then they asked if Shanti had been angry that her name wasn't on the house's trust. Again, David insisted she had no issue with it. But there was another theory, one that sent chills down the detective's spines. Money. Shanti had a $250,000 life insurance policy. And the sole beneficiary? David. Could that have been the reason for her death? With the evidence piling up, detectives confronted David directly. They asked if Shanti had died as a result of an accident during rough intercourse. He denied it. They asked if he had anything to do with her death. Again, he denied it. But the investigators weren't convinced. They believed his tears on the 911 call were forced. His grief, an act. He had been too calm in the interrogation room, his reactions too controlled. To prove his innocence, David agreed to take a polygraph test. But it was late at night, and they couldn't find an available polygrapher. With no official charges, they had no choice but to let him go home. Before leaving, David provided DNA samples, nail clippings, and fingerprints, evidence that could ultimately link him to the crime scene. Evidence that could be his undoing. David Tronas thought he could get away with it. But the forensic evidence, the inconsistencies in his story, the sheer brutality of the crime, everything pointed to one conclusion. It wasn't long before police made their move. David Tronas was arrested and charged with the murder of his wife, Shanti Cooper. The courtroom was packed during his trial. The prosecution painted a picture of a man obsessed with control, a man who saw his wife as a financial asset rather than a partner. They argued that he had grown desperate, drowning in debt, suffocated by the pressure of a never-ending renovation. And when Shanti threatened to leave, he snapped. In the end, the jury believed the evidence. David was found guilty. What do you think? Was this premeditated murder? A crime of passion? Or was there another motive at play? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more deep dives into the world of crime. This is Outlaw Operations, signing off. Stay safe. Stay curious. And always, trust your instincts. Story 3. The scene inside David and Shanti's home was chilling. Investigators combing through the crime scene took note of subtle but crucial details, details that would later form the foundation of a sinister theory. On the nightstand beside the bed, Shanti's belongings lay undisturbed, a single earring, its twin missing, as if she had been in the process of removing them. Next to it, her watch, taken off and carefully placed, further hinting that she had been preparing for bed. But Shanti never made it under the covers that night. Her cell phone was also there, untouched since 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2018. Investigators knew the significance of these findings. The lack of defensive wounds on her body suggested something chilling. Shanti never saw the attack coming. It was swift, calculated. Detectives theorized that she had been sitting on the edge of the bed, absent-mindedly removing her jewelry, when David struck. A sudden, brutal attack from behind. The evidence pointed to one grim conclusion: after taking her life, David moved her body into the bathtub. But why? Despite the violent crime, the house showed no signs of forced entry, no missing valuables. Robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. However, one item was noticeably absent: Shanti's $115,000 engagement ring. A small but significant piece of evidence that investigators suspected played a larger role in David's twisted plan. As detectives dug deeper into their relationship, they discovered the truth beneath David's carefully curated image of a happy marriage. Friends and acquaintances painted a vastly different picture, one of manipulation, control, and psychological torment. David had an unnerving habit of hiding Shanti's son Jackson's toys, only to return them when the child asked, as if toying with the boy's emotions. Investigators found further proof of this behavior when they searched the garage where David had been sleeping. Tucked away inside an unplugged refrigerator, they found an eerie collection: Jackson's missing toys, neatly stored away. A disturbing confirmation of David's cruel mind games. Then came the discovery of Shanti's private notes. Hidden within her computer files, they read like a desperate plea, an insight into a woman trapped in an unraveling marriage. She described David as controlling, cheap, and emotionally distant. She wrote of her sadness, her fear, and her growing desire to escape the suffocating life they had built together. Every meal out ended with the same excuse: David had forgotten his wallet. He controlled every aspect of her life, including their crumbling home, which remained in a constant state of construction, a metaphor for their decaying relationship. The case took an even darker turn when investigators uncovered a startling fact: Shanti had been hospitalized just months before her murder. She had complained about sudden changes in her health. She could no longer tolerate spicy food or alcohol, and she had been losing weight rapidly. The toxicology report, however, showed nothing unusual. But detectives couldn't shake the feeling that David had been slowly poisoning her. The only problem? They had no proof. Then, a breakthrough. Digging into David's past, detectives uncovered something chilling. Before Shanti, there was another wife, Carol. And Carol's story bore an eerie resemblance to Shanti's. David had met Carol on a blind date in 1997. They fell in love quickly and married 2 years later. Shortly after their wedding, Carol's health inexplicably declined. She suffered chronic nausea, fainting spells, and, just like Shanti, severe reactions to spicy food and alcohol. Her immune system seemed to be deteriorating for no apparent reason. Suspicious, detectives flew to Minnesota in November 2018 to speak with Carol in person. During their recorded interview, she recounted years of unexplained illness. Chronic pain, a weakened immune system, ailments that doctors could never fully diagnose. But there was one constant: David had been the one preparing her meals. When asked if she believed David had poisoned her, Carol hesitated. The thought was horrifying, unfathomable. And yet, detectives couldn't ignore the glaring similarities between Carol and Shanti's conditions. It was too much of a coincidence. 2 wives, 2 mysterious illnesses, one common denominator: David. The investigation into Shanti's death was no longer just about a single murder. It was about unveiling a pattern, one that pointed to a sinister predator hiding in plain sight, manipulating the women closest to him until their bodies could no longer endure. The question now was, could they prove it before he found his next victim? Story 4. A Deadly Secret, the murder of Shanti Trones. Shanti Trones had long suspected that her former husband had been trying to poison her. Even after their separation, her mysterious health issues persisted, making her fear that the danger had never truly left. But no one could have imagined just how dark and twisted her story would become. During the homicide investigation into Sean's murder, detectives received a call that would shift their entire perspective on the case. An employee from Club Orlando, a private men's spa, had crucial information to share. Club Orlando wasn't just a typical spa, it offered hot tubs, pools, a gym, and private dark rooms where members could engage in discreet sexual encounters. To enter, one had to purchase a membership or a pass. The employee on the other end of the line revealed a startling detail: David Trones, Shanti's husband, had been a regular at the club. He never missed renewing his membership, every 6 months, like clockwork. The employee even claimed to have personally seen David engaging in sexual acts with other men. This revelation added a chilling new layer to the case. Shanti's friends and family told detectives that she never would have tolerated or condoned her husband engaging in same-sex relationships. This raised a disturbing question: had she found out? And if she did, what happened next? Investigators theorized that Shanti may have discovered David's secret life and confronted him. Perhaps she had threatened to leave him, to stop financially supporting their home renovations. Could this have sent David into a rage? Could it have been the motive for murder? Detectives weren't ruling anything out. They meticulously combed through all evidence, including the tip about Club Orlando, to determine whether David's hidden lifestyle played a role in Shanti's tragic death. When forensic results came back from the state crime lab, they delivered a devastating blow to David's version of events. David had insisted that Shanti had slipped and fallen while stepping into the bathtub. But the evidence told a different story. Shanti's DNA was found underneath David's fingernails. The only fingerprints found on the bathtub? David's. Strangely, Shanti's prints were missing. If she had fallen, the detectives expected to find her prints somewhere on the tub. But there were none. Something was terribly wrong. On August 29, 2018, David Trones was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. David's arrest sent shockwaves through his social circle. His friends refused to believe he was capable of such a brutal act. Some claimed that the detectives had taken the easy way out, pinning the crime on David without thoroughly investigating other leads. But the truth was, law enforcement had pursued every possible suspect. At one point, they even tracked down a homeless man in Delaney Park who bore a striking resemblance to Academy Award-nominated actor Woody Harrelson. After questioning him, they cleared him of any involvement. They also revisited Shanti's ex-husband, Jim Cooper. Their divorce had been rocky, leading to speculation about whether Jim could have had a hand in her death. But after verifying his alibi, detectives ruled him out as a suspect. Still, the evidence against David was mounting. During a search of David's mother's home in Orlando, where he had been staying, investigators made a chilling discovery. Inside a suitcase, they found something that had vanished the night of the murder: Shanti's missing engagement ring. It was the final nail in the coffin. In July 2019, a jailhouse informant came forward with a stunning revelation. According to the informant, David had confessed to the murder. Shanti had discovered text messages on David's phone, messages that exposed his multiple affairs with men. She had confronted him, furious, cursing him out and demanding a divorce. David, overwhelmed by the fear of his secret life being exposed, claimed he blacked out. When he came to, Shanti was dead. But the most unsettling part? The informant told detectives that David had mentioned a poisonous substance, something called cambo. Cambo is a toxic secretion from the Amazonian giant monkey frog, often used in controversial alternative medicine treatments. Some believe it has healing properties, while others claim it can be a silent killer, leaving no trace on a toxicology report. Had David attempted to poison Shanti before finally resorting to murder? The thought was chilling. David's trial was supposed to begin soon after his arrest. But then, the world shut down. Like countless other cases, David's legal proceedings were put on indefinite hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Justice was delayed, leaving Shanti's family in limbo. Finally, after nearly 2 years, the trial began in 2022. But what happened next stunned everyone. David was declared incompetent to stand trial. Medical experts from both the defense and prosecution examined him and determined that he had an ongoing manifestation of schizophrenia. Despite this setback, the case wasn't over. After a 6-day trial in October 2023, the jury finally delivered their verdict. David Trones was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge handed down a life sentence, ensuring that David would never walk free again. Shanti Trones had once believed she had found love. Instead, she uncovered a world of secrets, deception, and ultimately, violence. In the end, her discovery cost her everything. And for David Trones, his carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled, revealing the monster beneath. Story 5. From the moment he was born, Peter Chadwick was set up for success. His family ensured he received the finest education, attending prestigious schools that laid a strong academic foundation for his future. But Peter's life was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would unravel into a chilling mystery. In his teenage years, Peter's family relocated to the United States, settling in the affluent state of Pennsylvania. There, he attended high school in Bryn Mawr, where he kept mostly to himself. After high school, he pursued higher education at Arizona State University. It was during this chapter of his life that he met the charismatic and captivating Chu Chu Lim, known to many as QC. QC came from an immensely wealthy Malaysian family, deeply rooted in business and power. Her older sister was a powerhouse entrepreneur who owned the country's largest latex glove manufacturing company. Despite their starkly contrasting personalities, Peter and QC's connection was instant. While Peter was reserved, analytical, and socially awkward, QC was a whirlwind of charm, quick wit, and infectious energy. She was the kind of person who lit up any room, the life of every gathering. Those around them often wondered how their unlikely pairing worked, but work it did. They fell deeply in love and continued their relationship through college. Peter remained an enigma to most. Acquaintances described him as difficult to get to know, almost detached. QC, on the other hand, was an open book, drawing people in with her magnetic personality. Perhaps it was this balance, the yin and yang, that kept them together. Eventually, they tied the knot and settled in the luxurious coastal enclave of Newport Beach, California. Their lives were a portrait of privilege and success. Their home sat among the sprawling mansions of the ultra-wealthy, and their days were filled with the luxuries that came with such a lifestyle: designer clothes, expensive cars, and extravagant vacations. Peter managed his father's real estate empire, often working from home, while QC took on the role of a devoted mother. She was fiercely dedicated to ensuring their 3 sons had the best life could offer, prioritizing top-tier education, extracurricular activities, and global exposure. She believed that travel was one of the greatest teachers, whisking her children away to foreign lands to immerse them in different cultures. Despite their opulence, the Chadwicks maintained a relatively low profile, preferring privacy over the ostentatious displays of wealth common in their social circles. But everyone in the neighborhood knew them. They were a familiar sight, always picking up their boys from the school bus stop, until the afternoon of October 10, 2012. That Wednesday was an unseasonably warm autumn day, with temperatures lingering at a pleasant 70 degrees. The Chadwick boys stepped off the school bus as they had countless times before, but something was wrong. Neither of their parents was there to greet them. Minutes passed. Then more. A neighbor, noticing the boys standing alone past 4 p.m., immediately sensed something was off. Peter and QC were meticulous parents, they would never leave their children waiting. Concerned, the neighbor approached the boys and offered to drive them home. But when she arrived at the Chadwick residence, her unease deepened. QC's car was in the driveway, but Peter's was missing. Several unopened packages sat stacked on the front porch, untouched. She knocked on the door. No answer. She called their phones. No response. This was not like them. Worried, the neighbor took the boys to her home and promptly called the police, requesting a welfare check. Newport Beach officers arrived at the Chadwick home shortly after, expecting to find a simple explanation, a miscommunication, a missed pickup, perhaps. But as they stepped onto the pristine property, something felt off. There were no signs of forced entry. Everything seemed meticulously maintained. Too maintained. As they stepped inside, the air felt eerily still. The living room was pristine, almost staged. The carpet bore fresh, uniform vacuum lines, untouched by the usual signs of a busy household. In the kitchen, a meal sat abandoned mid-preparation. A cutting board lay on the counter, half-chopped vegetables scattered beside a knife. It was as if someone had been in the middle of making dinner and had vanished into thin air. Then, upstairs, they found it. The bedroom told a different story, one of struggle, of violence. The bathroom rug was shoved into the corner. A vase lay shattered by the bathtub, jagged shards glittering on the tile. And then there was the blood. A small but undeniable stain, seeping into the cool white porcelain. The house was no longer just a home, it was now a crime scene. As forensic teams arrived, another disturbing discovery came to light. The safe in the master bedroom had been opened, its contents gone. Important documents, cash, valuables, all missing. The implication was clear, someone had taken what they needed and left. But where were Peter and QC? What had happened inside the walls of the Chadwick mansion that afternoon? As investigators worked to unravel the truth, the seemingly perfect life of Peter and QC Chadwick would soon reveal secrets darker than anyone could have imagined. And this was only the beginning. Story 6. The case of Peter and QC Chadwick was one that left detectives puzzled and the community on edge. From the moment the wealthy Newport Beach couple vanished without a trace, alarm bells rang in the minds of those who knew them. What started as a routine missing persons case quickly spiraled into a chilling crime that would unravel a web of deception, betrayal, and a desperate escape from justice. As the hours stretched into days with no sign of Peter or QC, detectives intensified their search, scouring hospitals, jails, and even the coroner's office for any lead. Yet, every attempt yielded nothing. It was as if the couple had simply vanished into thin air, until October 11, 2012, when the San Diego Police Department received a frantic call from none other than Peter Chadwick himself. He claimed he was at an Arco gas station, nearly 100 miles from their Newport Beach home. The voice on the other end of the line was shaky, erratic, rambling, a stark contrast to the composed businessman he was known to be. He painted a chaotic scene. According to Peter, on October 10, he had hired a man named Juan to provide an estimate for a painting job in his home. He supposedly met Juan while managing an apartment complex. As Juan inspected the upstairs walls, Peter remained downstairs, buried in work on his computer. Then came the scream. His wife's voice, shouting his name from the master bathroom upstairs. Peter claimed he bolted up the steps, his heart pounding, only to stumble upon a horrifying sight: Juan, strangling QC in the bathtub, forcing her under the water. Peter insisted that he tried to intervene, but Juan brandished a Swiss Army knife, threatening him to stay back. By the time Peter fought back, it was already too late. QC was gone. But that wasn't all. Peter alleged that Juan forced him to help dispose of the body. Wrapped in a green comforter, QC's lifeless form was carried to the back of Peter's Lexus. From there, Peter claimed Juan made him drive across Southern California, QC's body in tow. Even more strangely, he insisted that during this drive, a highway patrol officer had pulled him over, but after a brief exchange, let him go without further questioning. Peter's bizarre story continued. He recounted that they reached an Arco gas station near the Mexican border, where one contacted an associate named Chi. Once Chi arrived, they transferred QC's body into a van before vanishing into the night, allegedly heading for Mexico to dispose of the remains. Juan and Chi had left Peter stranded at the gas station, dazed and alone. Detectives arrived at the Arco station and took Peter into custody for questioning. As they sat across from him in the interrogation room, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Peter, the grieving husband, showed no grief. No panic. No sense of loss or desperation. His lack of emotion unnerved the detectives, as did his failure to ask about his 3 children even once during the interview. If his story was true, wouldn't a father's first concern be for his kids? More red flags appeared. Scratches covered Peter's arms, clear signs of a struggle. Even more damning, a fresh human bite mark was found on his forearm, suggesting QC had fought for her life before meeting her tragic fate. Investigators knew something was off. Returning to the Chadwick home, detectives combed through the house, searching for any inconsistencies in Peter's story. What they found contradicted his claims. The walls had recently been painted, yet Peter insisted he had only just requested a painting estimate. Why seek an estimate if the job had already been completed? Surveillance footage from the gated community's security shack provided another crucial clue. At 1:30 p.m. on October 10th, cameras captured Peter's SUV leaving the neighborhood, but there was no sign of Juan or QC's body inside. Later footage from a highway toll booth corroborated this. Peter was alone in the car. The California Highway Patrol officer who pulled him over confirmed the same. If Juan had truly been with him, why was there no evidence of it? And then came the most damning piece of evidence of all. A handwritten letter from QC surfaced, detailing disturbing Google searches she had discovered on Peter's computer. Among them, how to torture. As detectives dug deeper, a clearer motive emerged. QC had recently been diagnosed with an STD, a shocking revelation that pointed to Peter's extramarital affairs. It was later confirmed that he had been engaging in multiple affairs without protection, bringing the disease home to his wife. Friends of QC came forward, sharing that she had been contemplating divorce, but Peter had been staunchly resistant. A divorce would mean losing access to the family's vast wealth, something Peter simply could not afford. If QC left him, she would take the money, the house, and the comfortable life he had built. And so, rather than face financial ruin, Peter Chadwick allegedly chose murder. On October 11, 2012, with evidence stacking up against him, Peter Chadwick was arrested. What had begun as a desperate tale of a violent home invasion unraveled into a chilling case of greed, deception, and betrayal. The once respected businessman now found himself at the center of a nationwide manhunt after skipping bail in 2015 and vanishing for years before finally being captured. A man who had it all, wealth, a beautiful home, a family, had thrown it all away. And for what? The truth was clear, there had never been a man named Juan. No mysterious accomplice. No forced drive through the night. Just one man, caught in his own lies, and a wife who paid the ultimate price. Story 7. Peter Chadwick was a wealthy real estate investor, a devoted father to 3 sons, and a man who lived a seemingly perfect life. But beneath the surface, a sinister story was unfolding, one that would leave an entire community in shock. It all started with the sudden disappearance of QC Chadwick, Peter's wife. Authorities launched an investigation, but it wasn't long before the case took a chilling turn. Peter was arrested and charged with QC's murder. Despite the overwhelming suspicion surrounding him, he maintained his innocence, pleading not guilty in court. A week after his arrest, Peter's attorney made a surprising call to the detectives. He stated that Peter was willing to provide information on the location of QC's body. According to Peter, the remains were in Wildcat Canyon, a secluded, mountainous area in South San Diego. He claimed her body had been discarded in a dumpster. Crime scene investigators immediately mobilized, heading to the remote canyon with growing anticipation. Upon arriving at the location Peter described, they found an old, rusting dumpster hidden from plain sight. As they pried open its lid, the stench of decay filled the air, confirming their worst fears. Inside, they discovered QC's belongings, her purse, identification card, and a staggering $20,000 in cash. But the most horrifying discovery lay beneath a green comforter. When investigators pulled it back, they were met with the gruesome sight of severed arms and legs. It was clear that this was the remains of QC Chadwick. The medical examiner's office conducted an autopsy, confirming the body was indeed QC's. The cause of death? Strangulation. The brutality of the crime painted a chilling picture of what QC had endured in her final moments. Despite the heinous nature of the murder, the judge granted Peter Chadwick bail, setting it at an astonishing $1 million. The justification? He had no prior criminal record and strong ties to the state, given his role as a father. As a condition of his release, Peter was ordered to surrender his passport and was prohibited from contacting QC's family. With his freedom secured, Peter moved in with his father in Santa Barbara. Outwardly, he presented himself as a grieving husband and a responsible parent, attending court hearings and spending time with his sons. But beneath the surface, he was carefully orchestrating his escape. Unbeknownst to authorities, Peter had emptied his safe deposit box and taken out large cash advances on his credit cards. Then, one day, he vanished. His disappearance sparked a nationwide manhunt. The search was complicated by his wealth. His financial resources allowed him to evade capture with remarkable ease. Local authorities enlisted the help of the U.S. Marshals, hoping their expertise would be the key to tracking him down. The detectives combed through surveillance footage and traced Peter's movements. They discovered he had taken a taxi to Santa Barbara Airport. But rather than boarding a flight, he lingered for a short time before leaving in another cab, his destination unknown. Investigators searched his home for clues and found something disturbing: books and DVDs on how to disappear, live off the grid, and survive while on the run. There were even materials focused on Canada, leading detectives to suspect he was heading for the Washington border. Peter's sons later revealed a shocking truth: their father had confided in them about his escape plan. He planned to cross the Canadian border on foot, assume a new identity, take a menial job, and eventually reunite with them when he had enough money. For years, the U.S. Marshals pursued leads, following sightings from Canada to far-flung locations like Ukraine and Japan. But time and time again, their search hit a dead end. By August 2018, Peter Chadwick had been on the run for nearly 3 years. Frustrated but determined, detectives decided it was time to take a new approach. They needed to reignite public interest in the case and put pressure on Chadwick to surface. That's when they turned to the power of media. Law enforcement collaborated with the Public Information Office to launch a podcast dedicated to the case. They called it Countdown to Capture. The first episode aired in September 2018, detailing Chadwick's crime, escape, and the ongoing search to bring him to justice. The response was immediate. Tips poured in from across the world. Some claimed to have seen Chadwick in small, obscure towns. Others speculated on where he might be hiding. The U.S. Marshals escalated their efforts, placing him on their 15 most wanted list and offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. As Countdown to Capture gained traction, the lead detective issued a final, direct message to Peter Chadwick during the podcast's last episode. His words were firm, filled with the weight of justice closing in. He urged Peter to stop running, to think of his sons, and to face the consequences of his actions. But would Peter Chadwick heed the call? Or would he continue to disappear into the shadows? The hunt for Peter Chadwick was far from over. The world was watching, waiting for the moment when justice would finally be served. Story 8. The detective leaned in, his voice a quiet warning. "Peter, you can't run forever. The walls are closing in, and the police are getting closer every day." Peter Chadwick had spent years evading justice, weaving a trail so tangled that it took a team of relentless detectives and U.S. Marshals to unravel it. For years, they believed he had fled north toward Canada, but the truth was far more elusive. Peter had slipped south, disappearing into the vibrant chaos of Mexico. Their investigation led them to Pátzcuaro, a charming town nestled in the heart of Michoacán, Mexico. Known for its colonial architecture, cobblestone streets, and bustling markets, it was the perfect place for a man on the run to disappear. Peter assumed the identity of Paul Cook, a grieving relative of those lost on Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. This carefully constructed lie earned him sympathy and trust, making it easier for him to blend in. While in Pátzcuaro, Peter sought out a local realtor to secure an apartment. The realtor would later recall that something about him felt off. He had no soul, they said. Despite his unsettling demeanor, Peter managed to form a connection with a woman named Claudia. The two spent increasing amounts of time together, their bond growing stronger. Then, in May 2016, everything changed. Peter, Claudia, and her sister embarked on what should have been an ordinary trip to a concert. But behind the wheel, Peter became erratic. His reckless driving made Claudia's sister uneasy, and she pleaded with him to slow down. He ignored her. The car sped along winding roads until, in a blur of screeching tires and twisting metal, disaster struck. The crash was fatal. Claudia died on impact. Her sister, critically injured, slipped into a coma for 15 days. And Peter? He walked away with nothing but a limp. Before the grief-stricken family could process their loss, the district attorney's office presented them with a document, one that would change everything. It granted immunity to Paul Cook, absolving him of all responsibility in Claudia's death. Overwhelmed by shock and grief, the family signed it without question, unknowingly letting a killer slip through their fingers. By the time they realized their mistake, Peter was gone again. The chase continued, leading investigators to Valle de Bravo, a picturesque town in Puebla. Surrounded by crystal-clear lakes and dense forests, it was another ideal hideaway. But Peter's paranoia was growing. One night, as he watched a news segment covering his case, panic set in. Then, his iPad suddenly stopped working. Convinced the authorities had locked onto his location, Peter bolted. His next stop? Cholula, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. With its rich history and vibrant culture, it was easy to disappear among the throngs of people. But Peter was running out of time. In August 2019, a crucial tip led the U.S. Marshals straight to him. Within 24 hours, the net tightened. He was cornered, captured, and finally extradited to the United States. In court, Peter Chadwick, the man who had spent years evading justice, stood before the judge and admitted his guilt. He pleaded guilty to the murder of his wife. The sentence was swift, 15 years to life. The walls had finally closed in. But the story doesn't end there. Analia Bedić's journey took her far from the war-torn streets of Serbia to a life she never expected. Born in Belgrade in 1983, she had always been drawn to language and literature, earning a degree in French before seeking a new beginning in America. Virginia became her home, where she worked tirelessly as a hotel housekeeper. Her unwavering dedication and kindness didn't go unnoticed, and soon, prestigious opportunities at high-end resorts followed. It was at one such establishment, the Wheatley Hotel in Lenox, Massachusetts, where Analia met Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh was a man of contradictions. He came from wealth, but his life was anything but privileged. The son of a prominent neurologist, Brian should have had everything. Instead, he was left with nothing but emotional scars. Neglected by his parents, he grew up feeling abandoned and unwanted. They sent him to a prestigious boarding school in Rhode Island, but it was not a place of nurturing, it was exile. The loneliness festered. Later, he enrolled at Carnegie Mellon University, but his struggles followed him there. When his mental health deteriorated, he was sent to a facility. But even then, his parents failed him. Instead of supporting his recovery, they argued over who should foot the bill. Eventually, Brian was discharged without the care he desperately needed. Despite his troubled past, Brian cultivated an image of sophistication and refinement. He had a taste for the finer things in life, a hunger for luxury that often led him down questionable paths. One news report detailed how he once purchased an entire stock of rare white truffles, not for their exquisite taste, but simply because he could. It was a glimpse into a mind driven by impulse and excess, a mind that would soon become the focus of a chilling investigation. The stories of Peter Chadwick and Brian Walsh are tales of deception, evasion, and justice catching up, reminders that no matter how far one runs, the truth always finds a way to the surface. Story 9. Brian Walsh had always had a taste for the finer things in life. Even as a teenager, he exuded an air of wealth and sophistication, wearing suits and ties and sipping Pepsi in the lavish lobby of the Ritz-Carlton, casually engaging with high-powered brokers. He seemed destined for success, but behind the carefully curated facade lay a man with a darker side. In 2015, Brian's life took what seemed to be a promising turn. He met Anna, a strikingly intelligent and driven woman, and the two quickly fell in love. Their whirlwind romance led to an engagement, followed by marriage, and eventually, the birth of their 3 children. On the surface, they had built the picture-perfect family. But beneath that idyllic image lurked secrets that would soon unravel. Brian and Anna's life together was far from smooth. They faced a series of struggles, the most damning of which revolved around fraudulent art dealings. Using Anna's eBay account, Brian listed 2 Andy Warhol paintings, claiming they were original pieces and that he was reluctantly selling them due to a recent home renovation. His deception worked. An unsuspecting buyer in California wired $80,000 for the artwork. But when the paintings arrived, the truth came crashing down. The buyer, realizing they had been duped, quickly pursued legal action against the Walshes. The lawsuit alleged that Anna had used her trusted position in the hospitality industry to help Brian gain credibility and make the fraudulent sale. Whether Anna was fully aware of her husband's schemes remains unclear. But as Brian faced the possibility of a lengthy prison sentence, she took silent but deliberate steps to distance herself. She wrote a heartfelt letter to the judge, portraying Brian as a devoted stay-at-home father, but at the same time, she was making arrangements to relocate herself and her children to Washington, D.C., permanently. Anna Walsh was a remarkable woman. She carried herself with unwavering confidence, balancing the demands of her high-powered career with her deep devotion to her children. Her 3 sons were her world, and despite her frequent business trips, she remained a constant presence in their lives through calls, texts, and FaceTime. While she pursued professional success, Brian remained at home, tasked with taking care of their children, a situation not of choice, but necessity. His involvement in the art fraud case had left him under house arrest. On New Year's Eve of 2022, Anna and Brian welcomed a close friend to their home for a quiet celebration. Their guest arrived at 8:30 p.m., greeted by a smiling Anna and a seemingly relaxed Brian, who was busy preparing dinner. Throughout the evening, they laughed, made plans for the future, and captured memories in photos. When their friend left around 1:30 a.m., nothing seemed amiss. But the next day, something felt off. On New Year's Day, their friend sent a text message thanking Anna and Brian for the lovely evening. Brian responded. Anna did not. This was unusual. Anna was known for her prompt replies. Then, on January 3rd, she was scheduled to board a flight from Logan International Airport to Washington, D.C., for work. She never made it. By January 4th, her employer and her husband reported her missing. Brian told investigators that Anna had left early on the morning of January 1st, catching a ride-share service to Logan Airport. He claimed to have been asleep when she left. However, detectives quickly uncovered holes in his story. There were no records of an Uber or Lyft ride, no surveillance footage of Anna at the airport, and her credit and debit cards remained untouched. As concerns mounted, law enforcement launched a full-scale search. Crime scene investigators, aided by K-9 units, scoured the Walsh property and surrounding wooded areas. The local police force, along with state and regional authorities, worked tirelessly to uncover any sign of Anna. More than 50 officers were deployed, their combined expertise fueling a desperate search for answers. Divers combed through bodies of water near their Cohasset home, hoping to find any trace of the missing mother. What had really happened to Anna Walsh? The walls were closing in on Brian, and soon, the truth would surface, a truth far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. Story 10. The search for Anna Walsh had been exhaustive. Law enforcement scoured the surrounding areas, including streams and wooded terrain, hoping to uncover any trace of her whereabouts. Despite their relentless efforts, there was no sign of Anna. Days stretched into nearly a week, and the case seemed to be growing colder, until an unexpected development reignited the investigation. On the 6th day of her disappearance, a local detective received an unsettling ransom demand. The email, timestamped at 5:18 p.m., came from an address linked to a Richard Walker, 9984@gmail.com. The message was chillingly direct. "We have the so-named Anna Walsh here. We had a deal for $127,000, but she messed up. We have her with us, and if she doesn't pay the money, then she'll never be back. We know that the FBI and police are involved. Good luck finding us." Despite the threat, the email failed to provide any instructions on how to pay or even verify the authenticity of the claim. It was a dead end, yet it raised even more pressing questions. Was Anna still alive? And if so, was this truly a kidnapping, or a sinister ploy to mislead authorities? As detectives delved deeper into the mystery, their focus shifted to Anna's husband, Brian Walsh. What they uncovered about him painted a disturbing picture. In the early 2000s, Brian had proposed a real estate investment to his father, claiming they could make a substantial profit by renovating a dilapidated home in Lenox. His father, trusting him, poured nearly $500,000 into the project. But when the sale was finalized and it was time to split the profits, Brian vanished. No contact. No repayment. Just betrayal. The incident fractured their relationship beyond repair. Fast forward to 2019, Brian, despite being disinherited from his father's will, attempted to sell the property, further deepening the rift within his family. His financial troubles didn't end there. He was also accused of writing $30,000 in fraudulent checks, adding another layer to his dubious past. However, the most unsettling revelation came from 2014. During their engagement, Anna had called the police, reporting that Brian had threatened to kill her over the phone. Despite the gravity of the claim, the case was ultimately dropped when Anna stopped cooperating. Detectives tracked down Anna's mother, who was overseas at the time of her daughter's disappearance. Tearfully, she revealed that Anna had pleaded with her to come to the U.S. during their last conversation. Anna's mother had sensed something was terribly wrong but never imagined the extent of the danger her daughter might have been in. Then came another revelation, one that directly tied Brian to an increasingly sinister motive. Days before Anna went missing, Brian had his mother hire a private investigator to follow her. His suspicions had reached a boiling point after he lost contact with her for 24 hours while she was in Washington, D.C. Paranoia consumed him. He obsessively monitored her Instagram and Facebook, searching for any signs of infidelity. Investigators soon confirmed that Anna had, in fact, been romantically involved with a man in Washington, D.C. When questioned, the man cooperated fully, revealing that he and Anna had spent Christmas Eve together. With a solid alibi, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect, but the discovery only intensified suspicions surrounding Brian. If he had known about the affair, could jealousy have driven him to harm Anna? On January 9th, Brian Walsh was arrested, not for murder, but for misleading the police. His 3 children were immediately placed in the custody of the Department of Child and Family Services. Brian had provided detectives with a seemingly straightforward account of his whereabouts on New Year's Day. He claimed he had left home at 3 p.m. to visit his mother but had gotten lost due to forgetting his phone. However, when investigators scrutinized surveillance footage from the Whole Foods and CVS stores he claimed to have visited, Brian was nowhere to be seen. Furthermore, he failed to provide receipts for any purchases he allegedly made. Suspicion turned to certainty when authorities conducted a thorough search of the Walsh residence in Cohasset, Massachusetts. In the basement, investigators uncovered a chilling piece of evidence, a bloodied, damaged knife. It was promptly sent for forensic analysis. As law enforcement combed through the couple's electronic devices, another disturbing piece of the puzzle emerged. Among the seized items was an iPad belonging to Anna and Brian's children. What investigators found on that device would solidify their darkest fears. Between 5:45 a.m. and 7:47 a.m. on the morning of Anna's disappearance, a series of internet searches had been made, searches that read like a how-to manual for getting away with murder. How long before a body starts to smell? How to stop a body from decomposing? How to bury a dead body? 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. Can you throw away body parts? What does formaldehyde do? Can identification be made from partial remains? Dismemberment and best ways to dispose of a body. With each discovery, the case against Brian Walsh became more damning. What had started as a desperate search for a missing woman had now spiraled into an investigation riddled with deception, financial betrayal, jealousy, and, perhaps, the most heinous of crimes. As detectives worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, one thing became increasingly clear: if Anna Walsh was ever to be found, they would have to dig deeper into the dark, twisted world of the man who claimed to love her.